Breaking news, the following day in Gaza and the remainder of Palestine. Following a short 7-day break in late November, Israel has recommenced its savage assault of targeting Gaza with its bombs. At present, the bulk of the bombardment is falling on the southern part of the besieged strip, which is home to approximately 1.8 million Palestinians, many of whom were compelled to flee from the northern part of the strip in response to Israeli evacuation orders. A map has been drawn by the Israeli War Cabinet, headed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, that divides Gaza into 620 individual plots. This map is supposed to help Palestinian civilians avoid active war zones, as if it were straight out of an Orwellian dystopia. In addition, Netanyahu has, in defiance of international law, suggested that the entire 2.3 million people living in Gaza should relocate to a humanitarian area that is less expansive than London's Heathrow Airport. In light of this, what does Netanyahu intend to do the day following the war? The Egyptian government has openly expressed its concern that Netanyahu's war strategy does not aim to eradicate Hamas but rather to render Gaza inhabitable, causing the Palestinian residents to permanently leave their homes and bring about a second Nakba. But I think Netanyahu has a different, just as evil, plan for Gaza after the war ends. He is preparing to commit the same historical crime against the Palestinian people that his country did against them in the past. Though it may not be the Nakba, after cutting off access to the West Bank from Gaza, Israel progressively partitioned the territory into smaller, more isolated sections over the years. This greatly facilitated Israel's ability to continue stealing Palestinian land without facing consequences. Actually, since October 7, with the world's focus squarely on Gaza, Israel has dramatically increased the pace of its illegal settlement expansion in the West Bank and started openly arming extremist settlers. The fate of Gaza will mirror that of the West Bank if Netanyahu gets his way. In the beginning, the strip will be divided into 3 or more smaller areas, with buffer zones controlled by Israel in the spaces between. After that, settlers will flood in and begin claiming ever-increasing amounts of land, further isolating Palestinians and trapping them in small, walled-in communities where they have no chance of survival. Of course, Netanyahu seems to be ignoring a crucial factor: the Palestinian will to survive and resist, as he moves to mutilate Gaza in the same way Israel mutilated the West Bank over the past few decades. They will be fighting an existential struggle this time, on the ruins of their homes and the graves of their relatives who have died, with nothing to spare. They are not going to take their fate lying down. An unforeseen humanitarian disaster is about to unfold. More than 18,200 people, including at least 7,700 children, have already been killed as a result of Israel's collective punishment of the besieged population of Gaza. More bloodshed and suffering is inevitable as a result of Israel's apparent intentions to partition Gaza. It is our deepest wish that the international community will rise up in the face of this unprecedented, illegal, and heinous assault on a vulnerable people and put an end to this horrific assault. Nobody can put their faith in the U.S. and its Western allies to end the Palestinian people's suffering and restore their dignity when they are complicit in and enabling Netanyahu's genocide in Gaza, while hypocritically proposing a two-state solution. After Antonio Guterres' historic invocation of Article 99, the humanitarian ceasefire proposal had unanimous support in the UN Security Council. However, the U.S. vetoed the resolution. A few days later, the United States was even more marginalized when it joined 9 other nations in voting against a comparable resolution in the United Nations General Assembly. Giving Netanyahu's plans for Palestine another international stamp of approval is the only thing that will happen if we accept to just focus on providing the most urgent humanitarian relief, like food, water, and medical aid, to Gaza while letting Israel continue with its devastating assault on the enclave. No amount of humanitarian aid could save the Palestinians in Gaza if Israel does not end the bombing and tank attacks and agrees to lift the siege soon. A humanitarian tsunami of catastrophic proportions, involving bombs, bullets, and a variety of communicable diseases killing thousands of civilians starving and exhausted, will be unleashed if Israel's war on Gaza and its relentless siege are not immediately ended, as recently warned by Philippe Lazzarini, head of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. The world community, spearheaded by the majority of nations, should stop letting Israel and its Western backers decide what happens to the Palestinians and instead work together to find a fair solution that includes key regional and international actors, as has been happening since Oslo, recognizing that this long-running conflict is not between two neutral parties but rather an occupier, Israel, and an occupied people, the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, is the first step toward a just and lasting resolution. The international community's proposed solution should take into consideration the plight of the millions of Palestinian refugees and their families who have been uprooted from their homes since the Nakba. It would be like trying to put out a forest fire by focusing on the nearest tree and ignoring the larger problem. A piecemeal and superficial approach would be more effective. Similarly, ignoring the fundamental nature and grievances underlying this conflict or trying to address just one part of it, such as providing a roadmap for Gaza alone, would be counterproductive. An autonomous Palestinian state should be established as a precondition for any post-war agreements. In other words, the plan should make it possible for Palestinians to live in safety and dignity, have access to education and travel without restrictions, and have all the rights enjoyed by people everywhere. An example that has worked in the past could be the UN-led transition in Kosovo following the war in 1998 to 1999. After the war ended, the Kosovo Liberation Army, KLA, was granted permission to play a pivotal role in the political process that resulted in the establishment of independent Kosovo. The KLA had previously led the Kosovar resistance against Serbia, despite being designated as a terrorist organization by the US and others until 1998. The armed resistance group Hamas, similar to the KLA, will not rest until the Palestinian people are granted their rights and are free to live in dignity and independence, which means that their military aspirations will end as soon as the occupation ends. It is imperative that those responsible for Israel's sanctioned genocide in Gaza not be spared punishment if the rules-based international order is to endure following this atrocity. It is imperative that Israel pay for the rebuilding. Those nations that have already paid to rebuild Gaza after previous wars shouldn't have to pay for it again. In addition, the international community needs to immediately cease Israel's illegal settlement expansion into Gaza and begin taking concrete measures to establish a Palestinian state if it is truly committed to ending decades of bloodshed and establishing a lasting peace in Palestine.